a hush settles first. It moves like breath across stone, soft, unhurried, as though the chamber itself has just opened its eyes after a sleep of centuries. Dust shifts, rising, then sinking again in slow spirals, caught in a thin blade of moonlight that slips between cracked shutters. The moon finds everything, even here, even now. And there on the table of rough-hewn cedar rests the map. Its edges curl upward like the petals of an ancient flower dried beneath forgotten suns. Linen parchment, faded to the color of old bone, spreads out under the silver glow. The ink, if ink it truly is, gleams faintly, like starlight reflected on still water. The room is otherwise empty, no footsteps, no voices, only the faint rustle of night. It is said the map was not drawn by hands alone. Some claim it came to its maker in dreams, lines appearing beneath his fingers without his willing them, as though guided by some unseen memory of a world the waking mind could not conceive. Others whisper that the map is older still, that the traveler merely traced lines already faintly visible on the parchment, revealing what time tried to conceal. No one knows. Yet it waits, as it has waited for longer than any storyteller can recall, unfurled but unread. A question lingers in the silence like the last note of a vanished song. Who first dared to draw a world beyond the known horizon? Once, long ago, the oceans were believed to end, abruptly falling away into nothingness, as if the earth itself were a great vessel adrift on the back of a slumbering god. Sailors stood at harbors, eyes narrowed against the wind, murmuring prayers before placing their oars into haunted waters. They feared the void beyond sight, where clouds thickened like memory and stars burned in strange configurations. But someone, somewhere, looked beyond fear and placed quill to parchment. The map glows gently, moonlight gathering on its surface like dew. Lines curve not in the shapes known to any cartographer. Coastlines bend like sleeping giants. Islands float where no mariner has claimed land. Inland, mountains coil like serpents, their peaks tipped with tiny stars, as though dusted by another sky entirely. This is not a portrait of a world measured and controlled, no ruler's grid, no mercantile ports. It feels less charted than dreamed. A single symbol rests near the bottom edge, a feather encircled by a thin crescent. Scholars who have studied it see only ornamentation. But those who sit with the map long enough, those who let their breath slow, their hearing sharpen beyond ordinary sound, sometimes say they feel a pulse there, a heartbeat. The faintest suggestion of a story beginning. For this map belonged once to a traveler, a wanderer whose name has dissolved like salt on the tide. Only the symbols he left behind hint at his existence. No journal remains, no portrait, no final resting place, just a whisper floating in the margins of a forgotten text. The one who walked beyond the drawn world. He was neither conqueror nor merchant, for the map lacks the boastful precision of trade routes. It lacks borders or lines of wealth. Instead, it follows longing curving into shadow, spiraling into uncertainty, as though the map-maker were not tracing land, but possibility itself. Some believe he sailed from a mist-covered coast at the edge of a fading kingdom, that his ship, small, fast, carved from a single tree, slid silently through waters, lit only by the phosphorescent glow of unseen creatures. That the wind carried him where no sailor, fearing any god's wrath, would willingly go. Others insist he traveled mostly by foot, crossing salt plains where bones bleached beneath relentless suns, threading through jungles where the leaves closed behind him like hands gripping secrets. each step leaving no print, each night layer by layer teaching him how to listen to the silence between the stars. But all stories agree on one thing. He returned, changed, not wiser, not triumphant, but quiet, as though the world he had glimpsed left marks not on his body, but on the folds of his spirit. They say his eyes reflected unfamiliar coastlines, even when he stood safely within the walls of his homeland. They say he spoke little, only with murmured sentences that sounded like tides receding. And then he vanished. Some claim he died. Others insist he stepped through a doorway not meant for ordinary men. Perhaps he was called back by whatever force shaped his path and guided his quill. No record of his final days exists, only this map, left behind like a sigh that refuses to fade. The map becomes, in the listener's mind, a living thing, an invitation, a beckoning. Coastlines shift when viewed in different light. Islands glow with unspoken promise. Rivers branch in patterns eerily similar to tree roots, or veins, or constellations. One inlet curves like a crescent moon leading to what appears to be a city drawn with almost painful delicacy. Its towers rise not vertically but outward, like petals of a blooming stone flower. Beneath it, a notation, just a few characters, indecipherable, weathered beyond translation. Another location lies far from any shore at the center of a blank expanse. A temple, square and symmetrical, drawn with a precision that contradicts the surrounding dreamlike contours. Its roof is etched with stars, but not stars known to any old sky patterns, suggest constellations unfamiliar to those who remain bound to this Earth's horizon. Legends rise like mist around these details. Some say the city floated, suspended upon pillars of coral, rising and sinking with the tides of time. Others believe the temple reflected constellations unseen from any known shore, mapping a different firmament entirely, as though the world once mirrored heavens now forgotten. Priests, in their fear, forbade the map's use. They spoke of heresy of realms no human should seek, lest they awaken ancient hungers. Scholars dismissed it as fancy, a curiosity to amuse themselves between more serious inquiries. But the parchment survived, refusing to burn, refusing to fade. As though memory, true memory, cannot be unmade. There is a moment, sitting beside the map, when the mind grows still. The chamber falls away. Walls become horizon. Stone becomes open sky. A listener may feel, deep in the marrow, as if something waits just beyond sight, a shoreline, smelling faintly of salt and unknown flowers. A breeze brushes the imagination, carrying distant voices that speak not in words, but in pulse and rhythm. The map is not just a record of where someone once traveled. It is a reminder of where humankind has always wished to go. Beyond fear, beyond borders, beyond the edge of certainty. Ancient mariners spoke of world's end because they feared it, but others, the rare, the curious, leaned forward, peering into fog not as boundary but as invitation. They sensed mystery not as threat, but as promise. Perhaps the mapmaker glimpsed lands that no longer breathe, continents swallowed by the tide of time. Or perhaps he traced the geography of longing itself, mapping not earth but imagination. A world as it might be if humanity walked with open eyes and unburdened hearts. His map still calls to no one in particular, to everyone who pauses long enough to listen. And yet its greatest message lies not in the places it depicts, but the blankness it leaves behind. For at the outermost edge of the parchment, the lines dissolve into nothing. not abrupt, not frayed, simply unfinished, awaiting hands that may dare continue what was begun. Some truths are not meant to be possessed. Some roads require sleep to walk. Moonlight dims, the shutters tremble softly, the chamber exhales. The map rests still, unfurled but unread, its constellations of ink awaiting the next dreamer to trace them. And in the hush that gathers, a thought settles gently like morning dew. Perhaps he knew the world was larger than sight. Perhaps he understood that maps are prayers. Perhaps, in drawing shorelines no ship would reach, he folded hope into parchment, hope that someday someone would see beyond fear. The story does not end. It softens. It waits. No conclusion is needed. The map guides no one, yet calls everyone. Its invitation is simple. Look beyond what is known, and imagine what sleeps just past the edge of certainty. In the stillness before dreams, the map glows faintly silver on bone-white linen, lighting a path not meant for waking feet. And somewhere, in the deep hush between breaths, a whisper lingers. The world is wider than you have been told. And sleep, gentle and inevitable, arrives. Beneath a moon as pale as sifted flour, the desert breathes. Its dunes rise and fall in long, quiet waves, as though some ancient tide moves through them in slow motion. Nothing stirs but the whisper of grains tumbling from crest to hollow. Each tiny particle carries more years than any living creature remembers. Dust from mountains long crumbled, from statues reduced to pebbles, from stories that once echoed beneath vaulted ceilings, now smothered in velvet darkness. Tonight the desert feels awake, not restless, never restless, but aware, as if sensing a presence drifting near the edge of memory. For beneath its surface lies a sleeping city, sealed beneath centuries of wind-shaped hills. No lanterns burn, no footsteps stir, yet the air above it thrums with faint remembrance, like the last warm ember beneath a layer of ashes. It is said that when the moon reaches its thinnest crescent, the sands become almost translucent. The dunes no longer disguise what rests beneath them, they merely blur the outlines, soften the edges, as if protecting a dream not yet ready to wake. The first sound is subtle. A slide, a sigh, the gentle brushing of sand against stone. To any wanderer crossing this empty expanse, the desert would appear blank, stretching endlessly into silver-washed night. But the grains tumbling here were once mortar between bricks, dust caught in the hair of children running through a crowded marketplace. They once clung to sandals and stained the hems of robes as people hurried across sun-baked courtyards, carrying jars of water, baskets of dates, offerings for unseen gods. Below that shifting surface, the city waits. Its steps are intact, worn smooth by countless feet. Rectangular houses cling to narrow lanes, their doorways framed with carved lintels. Here and there, stone columns lean gently together, draped like friends whispering secrets. A fountain sits in what was once a central square, its basin cracked, its water gone to sand long ago. And beyond the open spaces lie chambers buried in deeper stillness, temples where prayers once spiraled into incense clouds, and storerooms where spices from distant lands were guarded like treasure. All of it now sealed, preserved by time's patient hand. Perhaps the people left willingly. Some believe they were nomads by nature, wanderers who understood that nothing built in stone could truly endure. They say the city was always meant to vanish, a temporary blossom that bloomed beneath a brief alignment of stars before fading back into the earth. like a caravan camp that never unpacked fully, always ready to fold its tents and move when the desert called. Others tell a different tale. They speak of a drought so long, so quiet, that the river feeding the city withdrew fiber by fiber, molecule by molecule, disappearing into parched soil without a single storm or flood to mark its passing. Wells sank dry, fields browned, children stared at cracked mud where water once shimmered, and when the last trickle vanished, the people followed its memory, walking north or west or wherever rumor whispered water might be found. But there is another story still softest of all, shared only in the still midnight hours. It suggests that the city did not die, and its people did not leave. Rather, the sands rose not as punishment or disaster, but as lullaby. A great hush settled over the land, and the city exhaled. Dune by dune, like sheets being tucked over a sleeping body, the earth-covered rooftops, ceiling windows, filling archways. Those within sank deeper into quiet, drifting into a slumber longer than any single lifetime. A city not destroyed, but dreaming. Move gently now. The listener is invited to descend not physically, but imaginatively through that velvet silence. Imagine brushing aside grains as fine as powdered spice, revealing a fragment of painted tile, a corner of a doorway, a scrap of fabric turned mineral hard. Beneath your fingertips, patterns emerge, spirals, feathers, stars with unfamiliar numbers of points. The colors are muted by dust, yet they hint at former brilliance, turquoise, ochre, faded lapis. Here stands a doorway framed by stone wings, each feather carved with careful precision. A guardian, perhaps, or merely decoration centuries have blurred the distinction. Beyond, a courtyard opens, its flagstones uneven yet still bearing faint scorch marks from cooking fires. The scent is long gone, but memory lingers. Bread, sweet herbs, a trace of smoke curling upward into air that once shimmered with heat. Picture now the marketplace. It lies beneath the deepest dunes, invisible from the surface. Stalls once filled the space baskets of grain, jars of oil, cloth dyed in colors drawn from desert flowers. Artisans hammered copper in steady rhythm, while jewelers strung beads, some now found scattered after storms, washed up like messages from beneath the sand. If one presses an ear to the earth and listens, some say the market sounds return in faint echo, as though time has forgotten to fully erase them. And what of voices? Do they truly fade, or do they slip into the grains themselves, waiting to vibrate again under the right moon? There have been whispers passed along firesides by nomads who travel not across the desert, but through it. They claim that when the wind falls silent, utterly silent doors can be heard opening. Not violently, not abruptly, just a soft creak, as though someone within is checking whether dawn has come. And sometimes, a hinge sighs shut again. Scholars scoff at these tales. They measure wind speeds, study soil layers, trace pottery fragments, and declare the city myth. No city could remain so perfectly hidden, they argue. No settlement of magnitude leaves so faint a trace. Yet artifacts arrive, not many, just enough to hint. A bead of turquoise carved in leaf shape, worn smooth by fingers long gone. A shard of pottery etched with constellations that do not match any known chart. A copper pendant, engraved with a spiral whose end is swallowed by sand, as though made to depict something infinite. Every piece deepens the wonder rather than explaining it. Now step further inward. Beyond the dwellings and markets lies the heart of the city, the sacred chambers. No flickering torches burn here now. no chance rise. Yet the architecture speaks of reverence. Walls rise not tall, but solid, angled precisely to catch the first and last light of day. Altar stones anchor corners, perfectly balanced, neither imposing nor grandiose. The builders seemed more interested in listening than proclaiming. And what did they listen for? Wind through arches? The murmur of dunes as they shifted? The distant hum of stars turning overhead? Perhaps this city was built not to dominate the desert, but to honor it, to live inside its breath rather than against it. It is here, deeper still, that one finds the absence of fear. Many ruins across the world bear scars, collapsed roofs, shattered statues, torch marks, rubble that speaks of conquest or catastrophe. But here the lines are smooth. Surfaces remain intact beneath their shroud. Even wooden beams, petrified by time, lie in place like sleeping limbs. The sands did not crush. They covered. They cradled, as if protecting something precious. Return slowly now, rising back toward moonlight and wind. Let the sands close behind, smoothing every imagined footprint. The desert is generous but private. It reveals only what the night permits. Stand again beneath the open sky. The dunes shift, reshaping themselves as though breathing. Moonlight spills in a slanted wash across unseen rooftops, tracing the form of an invisible roofline just beneath the crest of a hill. For a moment, one brief, shimmering moment, the listener may sense the ghost outline of walls, the gentle curve of an archway, the shadow of a courtyard gate. And then the vision dissolves, swallowed once more into the patient folds of earth. Above, the wind resumes its long whisper, not a warning, not a dismissal, but a lullaby. Perhaps the city will rise again. Perhaps it will remain forever beneath its blanket of slow-moving sand, content to dream while the world outside forgets and remembers in cycles. Or perhaps, and this thought settles like a feather, the city never wanted to be found. Not fully, not truly. Some places exist not to be rediscovered, but to remind us that time holds secrets beyond our reach. The moon slides westward. The dunes shift. Silence breathes. And beneath it all, the city listens unseen, untouched, suspended between memory and myth, waiting not for footsteps, but for the quiet minds of dreamers. Sleep comes, and the sand sighs softly over stone, as it has for 1,000 years, as it may for 1,000 more. In a land where the earth rises in long, solemn breaths, there lies a plateau kissed always by wind. Not a hurried wind, not the sharp whistle that scours dunes or bends trees to breaking, but a slow, reverent current of air, moving as though every rock, every grain of dust, were a relic deserving of respect. Here, beneath skies deep as the first breath of night, a temple waits. Its stones stand not tall, not proud, but steadfast, weathered by centuries and softened by time's gentle touch. You would miss it at first glance, for the plateau holds no banners, no torchlit welcome, only the muted hum of altitude and the rhythmic beating of a world far below. Yet, if the moon strikes the ridge at just the right angle, you might see something glimmer. Not gold, not fire, but starlight caught on edges laid by hands long vanished. Stones arranged not by accident, but by intent so careful it still whispers. It is said the builders aligned each block with the heavens, not to worship the sky, but to listen to it. For this was never a place of offerings, never a house of gods shaped in human form. It was a meeting point, a still pool where the earth and stars could reflect upon each other, Travelers once climbed for days to reach this height. Sandaled feet blistered, cloaks stiffened with cold, breath thin in the thinning air. Some arrived alone, seeking answers known only in silence. Others came in small groups, sharing barely more than gestures, as their voices thinned into whispers under the weight of altitude. At the final ascent, as dawn or dusk unfurled along the horizon, they would see it. A cluster of stones catching starlight, like mirrors tuned to celestial rhythm. And they would kneel. Step gently now, as we enter. There is no door, only an opening where two pillars lean together like elders deep in council. The threshold is marked by a single, carved line. Not a warning, but a breath. Crossing it feels like stepping from sound into echo, from wind into stillness. Inside, it is as though the air has thickened into memory. The walls rise, not high, but sure. Shadows cling in folds like velvet curtains, once drawn aside for ceremony. Yet the temple feels hollow, in no way harsh or abandoned. There is only waiting. Listen closely. The floor does not speak, but remembers footsteps. The slow tread of pilgrims whose names the world has forgotten. A hushed chant still lingers, barely perceptible, as though the syllables cling to crevices in the stone. Not one language, but many. Some articulate, others only rhythmic humming, meant to open the mind like petals before dawn. It is said that no prayer uttered here was ever meant to be heard by gods. Instead, they were offered to the sky itself, sent upward like drifting smoke, to mingle with starlight. Look now at the carvings. Not a single deity in sight. No war stories, no kings, no battles. Instead, patterns, endless patterns. Lines that swoop and knot, curves that spiral inward, symbols that unfurl like wings or ferns. To the impatient eye, they might appear decorative. Motionless murals, ancient artistry, but linger a little longer. Let your gaze soften. Let your breath fall into rhythm with the wind's long sigh. Slowly, the carvings begin to resemble something familiar. Sky maps. Not the constellations we know, but ones that have shifted over the ages, subtly, steadily, as stars dance their slow waltz across millennia. It is believed the priests or astronomers or dreamers who built this place watched the heavens not to predict fate, but to understand the language all things speak. When reduced to their simplest pulse, some claim the temple predicted eclipses and tides, with precision surpassing any kingdom's astrologers. Others insist the builders merely listened, placing their carvings in patterns they sensed, rather than studied, mirroring the sky the way a pool mirrors clouds. And there are more daring whispers still, that the stars learned from them, that human hands, guided by intuition or forgotten knowledge, showed the sky its first great geometric song. And the stars, moved by gratitude, answered in their own shimmering tongue. Move deeper, now, farther into the hush. Here stand altars of polished stone, smooth as water-worn river rock, reflecting faint light where none seems to fall. Their shapes are simple, almost austere, yet every surface is angled to catch radiance. Moon, starlight, even the faint blue glow of dusk. Picture flames once flickering in bowls of hammered silver, their light bouncing upward, to touch carvings still damp with fresh chiseling. Imagine the low hum of voices, not chanting enchantments, but breathing questions into the air. Questions not meant to be answered, only witnessed. These altars echo every hand that pressed against them, every forehead bowed, every hesitation surrendered to the unknown. Pass now into the inner chamber. It rests at the temple's core, round, calm, shaped like a lung or perhaps an ear, a space built not to contain worshippers, but to hold sound, or silence. The ceiling arches inward, its curve flawless even after centuries of wind and frost. At its apex, a small opening yawns. Not a wound, but an invitation. Through it, moonlight spills in a thin column, dust motes adrift like tiny stars, floating slowly downward. The floor beneath glows faintly, for it holds the temple's greatest secret, a mosaic. Not a mosaic of faces or triumphs, but of the night sky. Here, the stars coil into spirals, not random, but intentional. Galactic, perhaps, or mythic, or marking something we no longer comprehend. Some see beginnings here, the origin of all things. Others see endings, the path souls walk once breath departs the body. Most agree that whatever meaning hides within cannot be taken, only touched. Sit here, if only in imagination. Let the quiet settle over your shoulders. Let your thoughts slow until even thinking feels like ripples fading on a pond. You might sense something hum, not in your ears, but deeper, far beneath bone and breath. The builders, those nameless architects of stone and starlight, may have felt that hum every night. Perhaps it guided their chisel strokes, or lulled them into dreams where suns were born. Perhaps they learned that the sky sings always. But most ears are too crowded with noise to hear. Dawn begins to soften the horizon now, not in bright color or sudden glow, but in the faint graying of night. Like ink diluted, drop by drop, the temple notices, though it does not stir. Starlight retreats into the cracks between stones, resting until darkness calls it forth again. Wind threads once more through the columns, picking up loose grains and carrying them lightly away. Nothing has changed, and yet nothing remains the same. For those who climb the plateau, return not with answers, but with a sensation. That meaning lies just beyond knowing, a fingertip away, a whisper too soft to catch fully. The temple dissolves, not in stone, but in certainty. Whatever its builders knew, settles back into silence, unclaimed, unboasted, as though wisdom prefers to remain veiled, until the world grows quiet enough to hear it. And as the night fades from the story, and breath slows towards sleep, one thought lingers like dew before dawn. Perhaps the stars never needed to be taught. Perhaps they were waiting for us to listen. It begins with a glow. Not a blaze, not yet. Just a soft amber shimmer in the high rafters, where cobwebs hang like faded veils, and dust drifts in slow galaxies through the air. In a forgotten kingdom, near a quiet sea, there once stood a library that seemed less a building, and more a breath held by the world. Cedar beams arched overhead, darkened by centuries of smoke from oil lamps and candle flame. Shelves rose from stone floor to vaulted ceiling, laden with scrolls and bound volumes, their spines worn smooth by hands long turned to dust. It is said this place held the earliest questions ever whispered into the night. Maps of stars drawn on stretched parchment, where constellations were not merely hunters and lions, but pathways for souls and stories. Sagas of tribes that drifted across deserts like migrating clouds, their names erased from sand yet alive in ink. Rituals written in patient lines, explaining how to greet the moon, how to guide the dying, how to listen to the silence between waves. The library smelled of ink and cedar and cool stone, with a faint sweetness of beeswax from the lamps that once burned there. By day, light fell in shafts through narrow windows, turning dust motes into drifting stars. By night, the building seemed to float, a lantern of thought upon the sleeping city, its glow spilling into surrounding alleys, like quiet revelation. On the night it burned, the sea was still. No storm announced itself, no lightning split the sky. Instead, fire arrived almost politely, a small tongue of flame at the base of a curtain, trembling like a nervous confession. Some say a single lamp was knocked from its hook, oil pooling on the floor before catching spark. Others whisper that envious hands visited in shadow, setting alight that which they could not understand. But there is another tale, told only in the softest voices. That knowledge itself called the fire, testing which of its forms was ready to leave, and which was meant to endure. The flames grew slowly at first, curling around cedar shelves, as though tasting them, paper crisped, edges glowing red, then folding inward like burned leaves. The crackle that rose through the quiet halls was not a roar, but a murmur, a distant memory of forests, of campfires, of offerings returned to sky, scrolls that had waited untouched for decades, suddenly flared white, ink turning briefly to smoke, before vanishing into the rafters. From outside, witnesses would later say, the library looked like a single, luminous breath, leaving the world. Walls buckled, windows burst with sighs of heated air, cedar beams groaned and folded, sending embers swirling up like a flock of startled fireflies. Yet, as the roof gave way, the heart of the library did not yield. We enter now, stepping gently across the threshold of time. The fire has long since gone to ash. The city around it has shifted, rebuilt, perhaps even forgotten the exact place where the library once stood. But in this story, we return to the moment after the blaze, when everything is reduced to ember and shadow. The air is thick with the scent of charred wood, but it is not harsh, more like incense after ritual, lingering in a prayerful hush. The listener walks through blackened hallways, where shelves stand as skeletal silhouettes, their contents lost to heat and smoke. Ash lies ankle-deep in some corners. Soft as talc, ghosts of words and ideas mingled into one pale, drifting dust. Cinders glow in pockets, pulsing faintly as though reluctant to fall cold. A few stubborn scraps of parchment cling to the ruined shelves, their ink bubbled into unreadable shapes. Yet amid all this ruin, there is one place where the fire's hand never closed. At the back of the library, where the earth itself rises in a low, steady hill, a stone arch stands nearly untouched. Its surface is darkened by smoke, yet the carvings remain clear, a series of spirals, starbursts, and narrow lines that curve like the paths of migrating birds. Beneath the arch, a door had once stood. Now there is only stone, solid, unmarked by flame, and within, sealed behind that unyielding threshold, lies the chamber that refused to burn. Step closer, feel the cool breath leaking from between the stones, as if the earth exhales in long, careful intervals. Inside this hidden room, the air is preserved, still, dry, and faintly scented with old ink and linen. Manuscripts lie in orderly stacks, wrapped in cloth woven so finely. It seems more like pressed mist than fabric. Here, the letters are brushed in ink, ground from crushed lapis, deep as the evening sky. Even in this dim light, they glimmer faintly, tiny rivers of dark blue, interlaced with the whispers of gold dust. On some scrolls, diagrams unfurl, circles within circles, marked by tiny symbols at their edges, phases of the moon, angles of sunrise, the silent geometry of tides. On others, lines of text flow like quiet water, describing rites not of power, but of remembering, how to call back a forgotten name, so that it may rest, how to listen for the moment a newborn breath arrives, how to lay down grief, without losing the love that birthed it. Who protected these words? Chance, some say. Perhaps the fire chose another path, feeding on air richer with the scent of cedar and oil, never finding the narrow channels that led to this inner vault. Others point to design. They speak of a watchful architect who understood more than weight and stone. He or she may have traced angles, aligned not only with structural strength, but with currents unseen. Whispers tell us this chamber was built where the moon's invisible tides run strongest through the earth, where fire tires, where heat falters, where destruction hesitates. And there are those who go further still. They claim a guardian spirit walked the aisles of the library that night, lifting certain memories out of flame's reach, coaxing embers gently away from the most fragile sheets. A fanciful thought, perhaps. Yet, as you stand at the chamber's threshold, you might feel something like gratitude in the air, a soft pressure, an awareness, not welcoming, not forbidding, simply present. Let us travel backward now, through the years, to when this library still breathed in full. The lamps are lit again in our imagination, sending soft halos of amber around the long reading tables. Librarians bend over manuscripts, their shoulders wrapped in simple cloth, their hair caught in bands to keep it from the ink. They work not with haste, but with the unhurried patience of those who know they are in service to something larger than themselves. By lamplight, they copy, a single sheet at a time, a single word at a time. Each letter drawn with care, not as mere symbol, but as an offering. It is said that before they touched quill to parchment, they breathed once, very slowly, to quiet the noise within. They believed that a restless mind could twist meanings and leave unseen knots in the text. So they calmed themselves, as if smoothing the surface of a still pond, before letting ink fall. Around them, the shelves listen. On some days, messengers arrive. From distant shores, they bring with them scrolls, wrapped in sea-worn cloth, bearing stories of lands where the stars seem closer, where mountains flash with hidden veins of copper, where languages sound like rivers over stone. On other days, the librarians work in near silence, interrupted only by the scratch of quills, the soft turning of pages, the distant hush of the sea, beyond the city walls. They are not merely collectors. They are gardeners of thought, planting words where darkness might one day try to swallow light. There is a quiet faith in their work, a belief that even if their kingdom falls, even if their names are forgotten, these questions, these songs, these maps will travel forward, like seeds carried in the fur of passing animals, finding new soil in unknown ages. And so, when fire comes, whether by accident or intention, their task is not undone. The building may fall, the shelves may vanish, but the deepest longing behind their work, the desire to preserve the breath of the human spirit, finds refuge in that sealed room behind the stone arch. We return once more to ash and ember. The wind, curious and tireless, begins to wander through the ruins. It slips through broken windows, rattles loose fragments of tile, and scatters soot in delicate spirals across the floor. Ash lifts, swirls, then settles again, a gentle rehearsal of erasure. In time, new buildings may rise above this place. Markets may unfold their awnings. Children may run laughing, where once scholars whispered and scribes leaned close to their work. The sealed chamber will remain below, patient as bedrock. It does not knock. It does not call. It simply waits for hands brave enough, or perhaps quiet enough, to find it. Hands that will not rush, to plunder or possess, but to listen. Perhaps it will be uncovered by chance, the floor giving way under a mason's hammer, revealing a hollow where none was expected. Perhaps it will be found by intention, after dreams or hints in surviving texts. Send seekers searching for a place where flame could not speak. Or perhaps it will sleep on, century after century, letting its words dissolve, not into oblivion, but into the deeper fabric of the world. Knowledge fading from ink, yet surviving in intuition, in the quiet wisdom that appears in hearts that have never seen these pages. No answer arrives. The wind grows tired of ash and turns its attention elsewhere. The coals cool completely, their last faint glow, slipping into the vast, dark memory of the earth. And still, behind stone, the library remains. Not as a monument, not as a trophy, but as a subtle warmth. Like embers beneath snow, it is said, that knowledge born from the deepest longing cannot truly die. It may change shape, it may fall silent, it may hide, but somewhere in a vault of stone, or in the quiet of a mind, or in a dream that arrives unbidden, it continues, warming the soil, preparing the ground, for a dawn no one alive will see. So, as your eyes grow heavy and breath grows slow, imagine that hidden chamber, wrapped in earth, marked by the moon, veiled by time. Within it, scrolls rest in layers of linen, waiting without impatience, without sorrow, and far above, stars wheel silently over the dark sea, their reflections trembling on the water, like lines of unspoken text, Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. Perhaps, somewhere in your own quiet, the library that refused to burn will open its doors just a little, not to flood you with answers, but to share its gentlest truth, that nothing written in love, in wonder, in honest seeking, is ever truly lost. It only sleeps. And as you drift now toward your own soft darkness, you may feel, faintly, that same warmth, the kind that waits beneath cold ash, beneath snow, beneath centuries, waiting for breath, waiting for light, waiting, always, for morning, the forgotten mariners of the whispering sea. The tale begins upon a shoreline hushed beneath a silver dawn. The world is not yet fully awake. The sky is the color of faint breath on glass, and the sea lies before it, like a page waiting for ink. Waves lap softly at the sand, stretching out and retreating again, as though reluctant to disturb what has been left there. Faded footprints that only appear at low tide, shadows of steps whose owners have long slipped from memory. It is said that when the moon is thin and the wind holds its breath, these footprints seem freshly pressed. To those who rise early enough, they look almost wet, as though a crew has only just walked the shore, lifting their last bundle, pushing their vessel toward the water's waiting palm. But no figures stand there now. Only the whisper of waves, the distant cry of a gull, and a feeling that something once happened here. Something important, something gently extraordinary. Whispers tell us that this coast was once home to a people who sailed without maps. The sea, for them, was not an enemy to be tamed, nor a puzzle to be solved. It was an elder, a teacher that spoke in currents and foam, in shifting light and the weight of silence. They were the forgotten mariners of the whispering sea. Their vessels, long vanished beneath quiet oceans, were carved from single trunks of moon-pale timber. In groves not far from the shore, trees grew straight and tall, their bark pale as bone in certain seasons. From these, the mariners shaped their boats, hollowing the wood with patient hands, smoothing the hull until it held. The sheen of river stones, no iron nails sealed their work. Instead, they joined wood with clever tongue and groove, with bindings of plant fiber intertwined like woven breath. The result was a vessel that seemed to grow from water itself, light, flexible, and strangely quiet, its presence barely disturbing the surface it parted. Their sails were small, sometimes no more than a single sheet of cloth, sometimes nothing at all. For these sailors trusted the subtle muscles of the sea, more than the restless violence of storm winds. They listened to the patterns of foam as it gathered at their bow, to the way waves struck the hull, sharp, dull, eager, hesitant, to the cries of gulls wheeling over distant banks, their voices rising and falling, like a language of warning and welcome. They navigated not by instruments, for they had none, not by compass, for they required no needle to tell them where their hearts leaned. Instead, they traveled by feeling, a sense of alignment between breath and current, between the rhythm in their chests and the slow heartbeat of the sea. Some say they learned to read the wind, the way others read script, noting its shifts, its textures, its taste upon the tongue. Others believe the mariners carried within them memories older than their own bodies, a deep inherited knowing that rose to the surface. Whenever they stepped onto a boat, in forgotten corners of the earth, seafarers still speak of such knowing, though they cloak it now, in words like instinct or luck. But for the forgotten mariners, it was something sacred. Imagine now that we drift gently aboard one of their vessels. The shoreline has become a smudge of darker grey. Behind us, the sea stretches in every direction, its surface rippling like the skin of some drowsy creature. Above, the sky opens in widening circles of light, yet stars still linger, faint but not gone, keeping watch as night gives way. The mariners, if we could see them, would move without hurry. They would adjust a rope here, a wooden peg there, their gestures slight but meaningful, like minor corrections in a song. They have no charts to consult, no calculations scratched in the dust. Instead, they study the meeting point of water and horizon, where the color deepens, where the waves crease, where light gathers more thickly. They watch birds, not merely where they fly, but how. A gull that circles high and careless means open water, empty and unspecific. One that glides low with pointed wings is following something unseen. A school of fish, a line of shallows, a path the mariners can borrow. They listen, too, to the sound of the keel cutting through the swells. If the splash grows sharp and insistent, they know they are fighting the sea. If it mellows to a soft hush, they know they have aligned themselves with its quieter intention. When night falls, their true guides awaken. Stars emerge one by one, piercing the deepening blue. Yet the mariners do not point to specific constellations and say, "We must follow that one." Instead, they feel the sky's mood. Some nights, the stars prick bright and cold, distant and precise. Those are nights for maintaining course, for moving steadily along a path already chosen. Other nights, their glow softens to a kind of haze, as though seen through a veil. Those are nights of shifting, of letting the boat drift sideways, to meet a current they cannot yet name. They guide their course, not by position, but by conversation, between sail and wind, between hull and swell, between the silent pull they feel within and the vast, slow pulse of the ocean beneath. Civilizations that came later would insist that exploration requires tools, astrolabes, compasses, carefully inked charts. These mariners required only silence and trust. Where did they go? Stories carried by tides of time offer many answers. Some say they reached islands, now sunk beneath the water, places where coral grew around carved stone steps, and fish weave through what were once doorways. On particularly clear days, sailors claim to see the faint shapes of columns and plazas far below the surface, where sunlight still filters in thin shafts, touching the tops of drowned rooftops. These, some whisper, are where the forgotten mariners landed. Others believe they sailed deeper into storms than any prudent captain would dare, not recklessly, but with a strange anticipation. It is said that the whispering sea sometimes opens passages in the eye of the tempest, lintels of air and water, where the familiar rules loosen. There, in the center of towering walls of cloud, a doorway forms, not marked by wood or stone, but by a sudden stillness. To most, such storms spell doom. But to those who listen carefully, they may offer passage. The mariners, with their ears tuned to nuance, may have heard these invitations and answered. Some tales insist they sailed into such storms and simply did not return, not because they were destroyed, but because they crossed a threshold into elsewhere, a realm where maps have no meaning, where oceans overlap like folded cloth, and every direction leads inward as much as outward. If so, their boats may still glide on those unseen waters, timbers preserved by currents that know no decay. Their songs might still rise and fall, not as words, but as vibrations in the fabric of whatever lies beyond. But not all of their journeys were so otherworldly. Closer to home, they were known as traders, messengers, and carriers of stories. Villages along distant shores, places where the sand is darker, or the rocks are jagged and red, once spoke of vessels arriving at dawn, then vanishing again by dusk. The boats bore no flags, no carved emblems of kings or nations, yet the people who stepped onto the shore were greeted as kin, as if recognized in some deeper way. They brought with them shells carved into spiral shapes, marked with lines and dots. Like constellations caught in miniature, they carried driftwood etched with waves and stars, stones smoothed by the sea, yet sharpened with careful engraving. They shared no written language, yet their hands moved with such clarity that meaning flowed between them and their hosts, like water. And then, as quietly as they arrived, they would push their pale vessels out again, their silhouettes shrinking against the widening sea. They left behind no monuments, no fortresses, no claims, only objects, small, beautiful, mysterious. Over time, those who received them began to call these visitors the ones who follow whispers, and when the visits ceased, as they inevitably did, the stories remained. In the present, no wreckage can be found, no clear fragment of a moon-pale hull, no mast preserved in sand. The sea, in its deepest voice, keeps its secrets, and yet there are traces, on distant shores, far from the murmuring cradle, of the original coastline. Shells appear, not ordinary shells. These bear careful carvings, spirals intersecting with star-like marks, patterns that match no known local design. They are discovered buried in dunes, wedged between rocks, washed into tide pools, where children find them and turn them over in curious hands. Scholars ponder their origin, offering theories of trade routes, migrations, coincidences. But there is something in the patterns, something in the way the symbols curve, that feels like the echo of a song. Perhaps they are remnants of the forgotten mariners' journeys. Perhaps they are simply the world's own artistry, mistaken for message. Or perhaps they are both at once, reminders that not all knowledge comes in lines and measurements. Some of it arrives in curves, in spirals, in the quiet evidence of a people who trusted an ocean enough to let it guide them. And so the chapter draws toward its horizon. The shoreline we began on fades into dusk now in the mind's eye. The silver dawn that once bathed those footprints gives way to a darker, gentler sky. Out at sea, a small vessel glides. We see it perhaps only as a silhouette, a slim hull on the faint edge of perception, its sail barely raised, its path neither straight nor crooked, but attuned. The mariners upon it, if they are still there at all, are faceless to us now, their names dissolved like mist at sunrise. Yet their presence lingers, in the way the boat moves, not fighting the waves, but accompanying them. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the vessel drifts farther. The horizon thickens, becoming a line of darker blue, where sea and sky melt together. Then the boat reaches that line, and seems to hang there for a moment, like a thought just before sleep. And then it is gone. No splash, no flare, no tragic turning of the tide, just absence, soft, complete, like a candle gently pinched out between careful fingers. Where they went remains unknowable. The ocean knows, the wind remembers, the stars, perhaps, still hum with the paths they walked across their faces. But they do not say. Beneath the silence, the whispering sea continues its slow song, rocking shorelines, smoothing stones, carrying stories from one generation to the next, in patterns of foam and wave. And as you lie listening now, breath falling into rhythm with that endless tide, you too are gently rocked, as countless vessels have been rocked, as the forgotten mariners themselves were rocked beneath the same patient sky. Some journeys were never meant to end in record books, never meant to be fixed on parchment. Some voyages are prayers, spoken not for answers, but for the peace that comes from trusting the way forward. Perhaps these mariners never truly vanished. Perhaps their knowing has folded quietly into the sea, into the wind, into the instinct that still stirs in human hearts. When we stand at the edge of something vast and feel, deep within, that it is safe to go on, the waves continue to lap, soft and unhurried. The shoreline rests. The stars wheel slowly overhead, and the whispering sea keeps its secrets, rocking the world toward sleep as it has rocked forgotten vessels for 1,000 years, and will for 1,000 more. In forgotten corners of the earth, where moss grows thick enough to hush even the boldest footstep, there lies a forest that seems to breathe. Its trees lift cathedral-like canopies into the sky, braiding moonlight into strands of silver shadow. The air there always feels damp with memory, as though the leaves hold the residue of everything that has been spoken and everything deliberately left unsaid. And deep within that forest, beyond any path marked on map or myth, a solitary arch rises from moss-soft earth. It is not tall. It is not grand. It does not command attention the way ruined fortresses do, nor does it gleam like temples of marble and pride. Instead, it stands with a kind of quiet certainty, a curve of twilight stone, half swallowed by vines, perfectly at ease with being nearly forgotten. The opening image is gentle. Vines drape its stones like embroidered silk, threads of green, rust, and deep emerald winding over its surface as if they have chosen it, and it alone. To decorate, fireflies drift lazily through the arch, their amber lights pulsing, in rhythms too patient to be called flickering. They pass not over, not beside, but through the curve of stone, as though using it to cross between dreams. To any traveler stumbling upon this sight, it would feel less like discovery and more like arrival, for the arch is not hidden. It simply waits, content with the knowledge that those meant to find it eventually will. Legends say softly, almost shyly, that this gate once marked the entrance to a sanctuary unlike any other. Not a temple to gods of thunder or law, not a shrine demanding offerings, nor a hall where priests recited truths in booming voices, but a place built for the unanswered questions of humankind, a sanctuary for mystery. Those who came seeking it did not do so to bargain, to plead, or to prove their loyalty. Instead, they arrived with burdens. Grief they could not carry alone, fear they could not speak aloud, longing that ached like a bruise pressed beneath the ribs. They stepped beneath the arch with heavy hearts, and something no one could say what lifted weight in slow, invisible handfuls. Some say pilgrims walked out lighter, eyes softened, breathing deeper, yet unable to recall a single detail of what lay beyond. Others insist there was no beyond at all. Only the act of passing through that mattered, because the space itself, the threshold, did the work. The legend loops like a calming chant. You entered hurting, you emerged whole, and nothing remembered how. Time flowed onward. Centuries passed in widening circles. Seasons thickened, storms rolled, trees toppled and rose again. Whatever sanctuary may have stood behind the gate crumbled back into earth and ivy. Stone walls collapsed, pools dried, paths dissolved under carpets of leaves. Yet the arch remained, not pristine, its blocks weathered, edges softened by rain and wind, but undeniably alive in some quiet way. It seemed to remember its purpose, even if no human mouth could speak it anymore. Step closer now. Imagine brushing aside curtaining branches and finding yourself at arm's length from the stone. You notice first the color, not gray, not quite black. Twilight lives in the surface, a shifting interplay of shadowed violet and smoky blue, as though dusk were captured within it and never allowed to fade. Your eyes adjust, carvings reveal themselves, not bold, not deep, but worn into ghost-like relief by rain, wind, and time's gentle throat. Here, a pair of hands, offering a bowl of water, to no one in particular. There, a face with closed eyes, as calm as someone dreaming or listening for something, just beyond hearing. Elsewhere, a spiral, turning inward, never reaching a center, and never needing to. The symbols tell no clear story. There are no battles etched here, no proclamations, no triumphs of kings. Instead, the carvings drift, from gesture to feeling, inviting interpretation, instead of demanding obedience. Some scholars, dry-voiced and insistent, wave away the site as a ruin of no importance. A shepherd's arch, they declare, perhaps a garden gate. Meaning is an invention of those who wish to find it. Others, quieter and more patient, return in different seasons. Spring, when moss glows green under morning mist. Autumn, when leaves fall like sighs. Winter, when frost ribbons along the stones. They claim the air within the arch changes. Sometimes it cools, sometimes it warms. But on certain nights, never predictable, never twice the same, it hums with a vibration so gentle, it feels more imagined than real, as though something beneath the surface is breathing back. Pause here. Let the forest settle around you. Birdsong has quieted. Cicadas shift from silence into waking sighs, their rhythm a soft pulse between trees. The breeze threads through branches, not forcefully, but like fingers combing gently through hair. Moonlight grows deeper, not brighter, but more present, gathering in pools across the moss, and settling into the arch's hollow like liquid silver. And then something subtle happens, not outside, but within. The world invites stillness. It is easy to imagine that a traveler once stood exactly where you stand now, a solitary figure, cloak damp at the hem, sandals streaked with dirt, eyes weary from miles walked, and nights too heavy with thoughts. Perhaps that traveler heard stories from a grandmother's lullaby, from a road-worn companion, from a dream. Perhaps the traveler came seeking an answer to a grief too private to voice. Or perhaps they carried questions that no elder or sage could satisfy. They approached the gate, just as you do now, and felt the curious tug that thresholds create, that restless urge to cross, to know, to step into the mystery. Yet the traveler stopped, not out of fear, but because something in the air softly advised pause, and in that pause lay the gift. They stood before the arch and simply remained. Hours may have passed, or only seconds. Time becomes thin in places such as this, and when the traveler finally turned away, walking back into the forest, leaving the gate untouched, it is said their burden felt lighter. No epiphany, no revelations spoken aloud. Just a loosening of the knot, a breath deeper than before. For some places serve not as entryways, but as mirrors. Not every threshold exists to be crossed. Some are meant to remind us that the act of approaching, of standing in wonder without demanding, is its own kind of pilgrimage. And so the night deepens. Forest shadows lengthen into velvet blackness, soft as the inside of a closed eyelid. The arch grows darker, the twilight stone absorbing moonlight, until it resembles the silhouette of a doorway into somewhere that might not exist, or might exist only when unobserved. Wind drifts, lost in its own thoughts. Fireflies flicker on, as though guarding the boundary, not fiercely, but with affection. The moss shifts underfoot, the earth sighs, and one by one the carvings blur into shadow. The offering hands, the dreaming eyes, the infinite spiral. Soon nothing will remain visible, but the curve of stone itself, a crescent of darkness, against a deeper night. No pilgrim arrives, no chant rises, no footsteps press into the damp soil, and the arch remains, quiet, patient, as it has for centuries, waiting not for discovery, not for interpretation, but for presence. The forest exhales, its breath mingling with yours. And as the listener grows drowsy, nestled in the cradle of voice and night, the final impression forms, light as a feather and twice as fleeting. Perhaps the sanctuary beyond the gate was never a place at all, but a possibility. Perhaps the arch was carved so that anyone who found it would remember the shimmer of life's unanswered questions, the ones too tender for certainty, too wild for doctrine. Perhaps its greatest purpose was simply to ask softly, what if you are already where you need to be? The cicadas fall quiet, moonlight dims, the gate fades into a dream shape, and the forest returns to its ancient silence, holding mysteries not to hide them, but to keep them from being trampled before hearts are ready. Some voices only echo when the world grows still enough to hear, and as sleep gathers, you carry with you the hush of twilight stone. A reminder that not every door is meant to open, and not every question needs an answer. Before morning, in forgotten folds of the earth, where mountains press close like sleeping giants, and clouds rest low enough to brush the forest canopy, there lies a valley wrapped in rolling mist. It does not appear on maps. No pilgrim marks it with cairns. No merchant caravan pauses to water its animals and trade its wares. It simply waits, quietly, patiently, as it has waited for longer than memory comfortably reaches. At dawn, when the light first melts into the sky, the mist parts just enough to reveal a cradle of land, tucked between slopes of green and shadow. There once lay a kingdom, a small one by every crude measure. No towering citadels, no banners flaring against the cold wind, no armies drilling in rigid lines. This place was a gentler dream. Gardens spilled down the hillsides, in terraces as precise as poetry, each level bursting with blossoms, the color of sunrise and ripe fruit. Streams ran from the high peaks in braided silver threads, drifting into pools that reflected moon, tree, and face, with the clarity of still thought. At night, lanterns glimmered like fallen constellations, and pathways glowed pale, under the care of hands that believed tending the earth was not labor but conversation. Life here was not rich in wealth, yet overflowed with something harder to name. A kingdom remembered for quiet joy. But nothing earthly holds forever. One morning, bright, soft, ordinary, the first travelers crested the mountain pass. With news clutched close to their hearts, the kingdom was gone. No smoke or ruin marked its absence. No toppled walls or blackened stones. No echoes of a shout that might have preceded calamity. There was simply absence, like a word that evaporates from the tongue before it can be spoken. Grass-covered streets that had moments before thrummed with footsteps. Pools lay undisturbed, their surfaces unbroken by breath or hand. Fruit ripening in the sun hung untouched on their stems, until time eased them to earth. The kingdom had dissolved, like morning frost beneath the gentle arrival of day. Some assumed death, others feared abduction, but no bodies, no trace, no funeral markers waited beneath the sky. Only the wind moved, slow, steady, certain, and with it came rumors, strange, shimmering at their edges, of a choice made not in desperation, but in clarity. Whispers tell us that the people of this valley held a philosophy unlike any held around them. They believed the world was not a hard-walled room, but a shared dream, a place where presence was temporary, change inevitable, and the deepest truths could be followed only when one ceased clinging to the surface of things. Impermanence to them was not tragedy, but rhythm. Homes were built not to defy time, but to greet it with open doors. Songs were taught not as lineage, but as breath meant to join birdsong and wind. And children were raised with the knowledge that even mountains wander, given enough ages, but dreams, even shared ones, can sour under the weight of intrusion. News arrived slowly at first, like distant thunder that cannot yet be named, that outsiders coveted the valley's bounty. Plots were drawn, caravans assembled, and soldiers, armored in hunger rather than protection, prepared to march. The valley's people faced a choice: to remain and harden, to fight and fracture, to sacrifice the very peace that shaped their existence, or to let go. Some claim the choice took years of contemplation. Others say it took merely a breath, and one night no brighter, no darker than any other. The kingdom stepped away, not into exile, not into death, but into some place just beyond, the fabric of waking sight. If you walk the valley now, you will see beauty weathered but unbroken. Terraces lie beneath a tapestry of ivy, their stone outlines still visible. When fog thins and sunlight rests upon them, river channels remain, curving through the land like poetry half remembered. Pools still fill after rainfall, mirroring clouds that pause above them, as if to read their own reflection. Among the vine tangles, you may find fragments: a stone etched with a figure, bearing a lantern half wrapped in cloth. Light offered, but softly, so as not to blind. Nearby, another carving, a person scattering seeds into open air, their face lifted in calm surrender. Scholars, stern, tidy, certain, interpret these figures as resignation, a culture abandoning struggle, a people who gave up their home. Yet the valley air carries another meaning, a gentler truth sleeper warm beneath the soil, perhaps scattering seeds. Was not resignation, but invitation. Perhaps covering the lantern was not surrender, but humility. Perhaps leaving was not loss, but fulfillment, a choice to dissolve rather than harden, to remain a dream rather than become a wound. Stand still long enough, and you might feel a faint ache, not painful, but wistful, a longing for voices that once echoed here, laughter that once rippled between terraces, songs that might have rolled like water down the hillside steps at dusk. But layered beneath that ache is wonder, a sense that something extraordinary happened here, something nearly impossible to name without walking it. Not destruction, not abandonment, intention. A community so devoted to peace that it chose to slip the thread of history's loom, rather than be woven into patterns of conquest and grief. Imagine for a moment a people who decided that a dream could be protected best by stepping back into the realm from which dreams arise. That legacy could survive more fiercely in myth and mist than in fortress stone. That presence is not limited to visibility, As night drapes itself across the mountains, the valley grows hushed again. Mist rolls down the slopes like slow breath, gathering in hollows and drifting between the terraces like memory. Moonlight threads the air in pale ribbons, settling into cracks where stones meet roots, warming moss, silvering carved figures that seem, under its light, to move ever so slightly. If you listen closely, with the same tender attention, you might give a shell pressed to your ear. You could almost imagine the valley stirring, not waking, not returning, just breathing, a pulse, a presence, a continued existing, just half a step outside of waking vision. The gardens have not died. They sleep beneath ivy. The rivers have not vanished. They sink and rise with seasons. The kingdom has not been erased, only relocated to the corner where perception thins, to the seam between here and elsewhere, to that trembling space where stories are truer than facts. And so the tale ends, not with revelation, but with invitation. Dawn sneaks gently through the mist, its first rays sliding like golden threads across the valley floor. Nothing new is revealed. No ghost walks out from between the trees. No king's decree hangs in the air. Yet, something inside the listener has shifted. Loss glows faintly, like the last ember of a fire, not fully gone out. Wonder hums beneath it, waiting. Perhaps the kingdom vanished, because it was ready and the world was not. Perhaps it left its gardens, its walls, its terraces, as gifts for those who wander, gentle reminders that peace is not passive, and disappearance can be a form of wisdom. Perhaps the valley was never meant to return. Perhaps it blooms still, in a place one must reach, not with footsteps, but with breath. In the hush of night, when thought dissolves into dream, and edges blur like mist on the mountainside, the vanished kingdom continues, unseen, but not forgotten, a reminder that not every ending is loss. Some are ascension, in forgotten reaches of the world, where the land lifts itself into jagged stone shoulders, and the wind wears the mountains smooth. There stands a monastery clinging to a cliff. It rises from the rock, as though grown rather than built. Walls the color of dusk-dulled bone, timbers stained by centuries of salt air, blown from a distant, unseen sea. Few travelers venture so far. The path spirals upward through scree, and twisted pines that bend in permanent bows, as though paying respect to something older than prayer itself. Those who do ascend arrive with breath thin in their chests and minds emptied by altitude. They discover silence waiting there, a silence so deep that it feels carved, hewn from stone, and polished by centuries of footsteps light as snow. Inside that silence, in a chamber with narrow windows, and a ceiling blackened by ancient lamps, lies the clock. It rests upon a platform of granite, anchored as though no human strength could ever move it. Around it, shadows pool, like ink collecting in the grooves of old writing. Thin beams of daylight slip through the slats of a warped shutter and press themselves against gears that have not turned in longer than memory recalls. Dust settles upon those gears with the softness of winter's first snowfall, layer by layer, never rushed, never disturbed. Bronze teeth, mellowed to faded honey, gleamed just slightly beneath the film, as if waiting for fingers to brush them clean. Stone wheels rarer still, bear faint carvings, their edges smoothed not by wear, but by centuries of stillness. It is said, no machine the world built later resembled this strange instrument, for this clock did not count hours, or minutes, or the precise sliver of time a candle takes to burn. The monks who once tended it believed that time was not a rigid ladder to be measured and chopped into fractions, but a breath, a pulse, a tide that rose and fell in patterns too large for ordinary minds to grasp. Thus the clock counted differently, or perhaps, though none now can confirm, it did not count at all. The monks left no clear record of how the clock worked, or what it was meant to guard. Only whispers remain, thin threads woven into myth and recollection. Some say it tracked the movements of stars, its gears aligning with constellations, in ways unseen from valleys below. Others swear the clock kept rhythm with the tides of the distant ocean, a body of water whose voice sometimes rose to the monastery. In low, moaning winds, more mysterious souls believe it marked something deeper, the slow unfurling of a soul across its life, the shifting seasons of grief and joy, or perhaps the hidden currents through which memory itself flows. There are even those who insist the clock wound backward at times, returning stolen moments to the earth each night, so that weary hearts might gently reclaim pieces of themselves lost to sorrow. But these are stories, each one a reflection of the teller's longing. There is no ledger, no manual, no monk's confession carved in stone. Only dust, only gears, only silence. It is said that knowledge of the clock's purpose was passed down by voice alone, from elder to novice, from caretaker to apprentice. The words drifted like smoke into dim rafters, as the monastery filled each night with the murmur of chanting, soft as distant surf. The monk chosen to tend the clock did not wind it, for some believe it needed no winding. Instead, the caretaker listened. They placed one hand upon the stone rim, and one upon their own chest, and breathed, slowly, deeply, until their pulse became indistinguishable from the faint vibration beneath their palm. Only then did the gears move, not visibly, not dramatically, perhaps only in spirit, but the monks felt time shift. In those rare moments, a tremble beneath the world's surface, like fresh snow slipping from a pine bough. Then age did what age does. One winter, when the sky held low clouds that refused to release snow, yet pressed cold into every doorway, the last caretaker of the clock closed his eyes. His breath slowed, steady as the ocean far below, and at some point in that endless night, it simply did not return. With no apprentice to receive the whisper line of inherited knowledge, the monastery fell silent. The chant faded, the lamps burned out, footsteps ceased, and the clock, having no one to touch it, to breathe with it, to listen, stilled. But something within it, Those who sense such things claim, never stopped. Trace your fingertips now, along its base in imagination. There, etched into the bronze, spirals curl inward, like the tightening coil of a fern, or the curling of a wave, just before it breaks. Symbols ring the circumference, some shaped like stars, some like droplets, some too abstract to name or hold. The writing appears to pull inward, toward a center, no longer visible beneath dust. It suggests a destination, or perhaps a return. Scholars who have climbed the cliffs leave with more questions than answers. They argue the inscriptions might be a calendar of sorts, tracking long cycles, long forgotten. Others insist the markings speak not of measurement, but of surrender, of accepting time not as master, but as companion. Yet none can deny that, standing near the clock, feels strangely alive, as if stepping into a room filled with the slow heartbeat of something vast and ancient. Many evenings, when wind howls along the cliffs and clouds drag shadows, like curtains across the sky, villagers below swear. They hear a hum, low, steady, barely perceptible. Not hymns, not music, but something like chanting buried in stone, like memory humming to itself. In the bones of the world, those who dismiss such stories have never spent a night in places where silence becomes its own teacher. Seasons have come and gone in their slow, shimmering wheel. The monastery crumbles at its edges. Roof tiles slip. Birds nest in the eaves. Lichen crawls over the outer walls, like frost frozen in time. Yet the chamber where the clock rests remains largely untouched. Dust thickens. Spiderwebs sway, but stone holds firm. It is as if the structure understands. It shelters something that should not be rushed. Back into the world, the clock does not rust. It does not collapse. It does not fade into the anonymity of relics. It waits, not yearning, not resisting, just present, as though deep within its gears lies purpose yet unfulfilled, or purpose that requires nothing more than being. As the chapter draws to stillness, we stand once more. In the quiet chamber, moonlight slips through cracks, catching motes of dust that dance like stars of a miniature cosmos. The clock remains motionless, or appears to. Yet beneath that surface, the mind imagines movement, a tick too slow for sound, a gear turning once a century, a wheel shifting a fraction, with the rising of a distant moon. Perhaps it keeps time unknown to humankind, marking the lifespan of rivers, the wearing of mountains, the breath cycles of forests, or perhaps its task has already been completed. Perhaps the stillness is not failure, but victory, a machine that has done all it was built to do and rests in earned peace. Time, like sleep, continues whether counted or not, and the clock, ancient, steadfast, reminds us softly that nothing essential is lost in quiet. Some truths unfold only when unmeasured. Some rhythms persist without witness, and some machines, like some mysteries, do their greatest work in silence. So, as night stretches its cool veil and eyelids grow heavy, imagine the faint hum beneath stone and dust, the echo of an ancient breath, still aligning itself with the turning of stars. Perhaps the clock yet counts, or perhaps it simply waits for someone ready to listen to time as the universe intended it, not in hours, not in minutes, but in wonder. In a forgotten reach of the world, where the horizon spreads so wide, it seems to breathe with the turning of the earth, there lies a plain swaying beneath endless sky. It is not a plain marked on modern maps. No caravan road crosses it. No fences stitch it into tidy parcels of ownership. It stretches softly, endlessly, as if the land has chosen to forget all but the language of grass, wind, and time. And there, on this broad sweep of earth, stands a circle of ancient stones. They rise from the ground, like teeth of some long sleeping creature, or like sentinels keeping watch over secrets too deep for human words. Not towering pillars, not polished obelisks, not monuments bearing carved pride, just stones, weathered, lichen-clad, their surfaces softened by centuries of wind and rain and moonlight, yet they stand with a patience that puts kingdoms to shame. The tale begins as twilight settles into soil and sky. The grasses hush as evening arrives, their murmur shifting from rustle to whisper, the way voices fall silent. In the presence of something sacred, shadows lengthen, not hurriedly, but with the slow grace of dusk, taking its rightful place. And in this deepening blue, just before stars begin to pierce the sky's veil, the stones appear to breathe, not literally, not with lungs or pulse, but with a sense of presence, as though the day's light has been withdrawn into their cores, and night's darkness is gathering around them in response. It is said that in other ages, when night fell across this plain, like a veil across an altar, the stones sang, not with sound carried on ordinary air, no hummed tune, no chanted melody, no thunderous chorus. Their singing lived deeper, a resonance beneath skin and sense, trembling softly in bone and heart, felt more than heard. People once gathered here to listen when the sky bruised violet and the moon rose thin as a blade. Villagers walked from miles around, some leading children by hand, others leaning on staffs worn smooth by use. They stood within the circle or sat cross-legged in grass, cool with evening dew. Some held hands, others closed their eyes. A few pressed palms flat to the ground, and in the hush that followed, before night fully claimed the field, they felt it, the earth humming, not the rumble of volcano, nor the far-off crack of ice, but something gentler, a thrum that vibrated up from soil, into bodies, into breath, into quiet places of the mind, where thought loosens its grip. The stones responded, or perhaps initiated. No one could say. Their resonance shifted with emotion. The joyful heart felt a rising warmth, like the embers of a just lit fire. The grieving soul sensed a slow pulse, steadying sorrow without denying it. Footsteps across the grass were echoed in tone, The wind passing between the stones turned into long, sighing notes that lingered long after the breeze had gone, and when storms rolled toward the horizon, lightning flashing in distant clouds, the stones changed their song, their deep vibration sharpened, not frantic, but alert, a warning that shepherds felt in their ribs, before dark clouds ever crested the ridge. Without a single word, without a prophet, a priest, or a herald, the circle spoke, and the people listened. Scholars, arriving centuries too late, dismiss these stories with crisp certainty. They speak of temperature changes, of stone density absorbing heat and releasing it, of myth magnified through repetition. Stones do not sing, they insist, lips tight with rational comfort. But the plain disagrees. What science cannot explain, the land remembers. Walk among the stones today and notice what logical eyes overlook. Lichen does not scatter itself at random. Here, it spreads in shapes that mirror star patterns overhead. On certain nights of the year, not Orion, not the North Star, but lesser-known constellations, those with names spoken now, only in dried ink and lost lore, touch the tallest stone when the moon wanes thin as a fingernail, and you may feel it, a faint tingling, as though the stone is a shell, and some vast ocean murmurs within. Children raised near the site swear they hear shifting rhythms. If they rest their heads against the stone, just before night fully descends, they describe it not as sound, but as comfort. Like lullabies sung by the earth itself, songs that cradle rather than demand. They cannot prove it, and do not wish to. Children do not measure wonder, they simply receive it. The emotional journey begins as curiosity, a desire to know what the stones are and how they came to be. But stay longer. Sit on the cool earth. Feel the grasses brush at your ankles. As night deepens, let the plain reveal itself. With the slowness of a waking dream, the stones shift from relics into companions. Their silent presence steadies thought. Their stillness suggests possibility. Perhaps the stones were placed here, not to speak to the ear, but to remind the body what listening truly means. Not outward, inward, for every vibration they once held, every echo, every invisible note, seems to remain suspended in the soil beneath them, a memory not erased, only dormant, like seeds waiting under winter frost. It is said that the stones sang most strongly when hearts arrived open, not expecting answers, but offering attention, not seeking conquest, but seeking communion. Now, in a world deafened by noise, that kind of listening is rare. Perhaps the stones have not ceased singing. Perhaps the song has simply slipped beyond the threshold of ears unwilling or unable to hear. The night deepens fully. Stars flare awake overhead. First a few, then many, like sparks caught in an invisible net. The plain cools. Dew gathers. Grass bends in small bows. The stones stand unmoving. A circle, a constellation on earth, mirroring the sky. No tone rises. No pulse thrums. Or perhaps it does, but only the heart registers it, in its quiet chambers, beneath the rustle of thought. The line between reality and myth softens like twilight light on the horizon. Some voices only echo. When the world grows still enough to hear, perhaps the song once known is sleeping now, like embers buried beneath ash, warm though unseen. Perhaps the next listener, the next dreamer willing to pause, beneath widening skies, will feel the hum stir again. And so the tale ends, not with crescendo, but with hush, as your breath slows and night folds around you. Imagine the stones at the edge of the world, waiting with endless patience, as they have for 1,000 nights, and 1,000 more. The grasses continue their murmured prayer. The sky continues its slow wheeling turn, and the stones stand poised, still remembering every note ever sung. When ears attune, when hearts unclench, when the rush of days slips away, the song will return. For the earth hums still, beneath silence and soil, beneath memory and forgetting, and the stones, those patient companions, will sing again with nightfall. In a hidden valley, where the world exhales between mountains, where birch trees lift pale leaves that shimmer like coins in moonlight, a river winds its silver way through shadow and sleep. It does not rush. It does not roar. It moves with the patience of something that has seen all seasons, all eras, all stories unfold and fade again. Its surface glimmers faintly, catching the glow of stars, riding still pools, as though the sky itself has placed its memories on the water to drift. And so the tale begins, not with people or kingdoms or fame, but with the sound of quiet, steady water, slipping over stone, a voice older than language, and gentler than breath. Villagers from nearby hamlets claim the river remembers. They say that every footstep taken along its banks, bare feet padded with moss, hooves of goats climbing to pasture, sandaled wanderers traveling toward distant shrines, has been collected and cradled by the current. They say that each whispered hope cast upon its surface, each story murmured over nets at dawn, each lullaby hummed to soothe a restless child, has wrapped itself around the river's edges and sunk into its winding heart. To pass beside this river is not merely to travel a path through land, but to be witnessed. It is said the river listens, the way elders once did, fully, silently, without judgment or haste. Long before the villagers came, the water was lined with settlements, timber halls, woven shelters, small clearings where fires flickered. Beneath the open night, people lived close to the river, trusting it, speaking to it, offering pieces of themselves for the water to carry. Fragments of their lives still rise to the surface. When the river is feeling generous, after heavy rain, when swollen banks spill into meadows, villagers discover gifts, left glistening in the mud, a clay bead, smeared with tawny water, yet still marked with the faint impression of a thumb that shaped it. A mask, no larger than a plum, carved with delicately arched brows, and lips parted as if to sing, and once a charm etched with a spiral, unlike any found elsewhere. a symbol that curls inward, with no end visible, as though promising there is always a return. These offerings are treasures, though not for their material worth. They are messages, whispers from a world that trusted the river to carry memory forward. It is believed those who lived here taught their children that when a body dies, it flows into the river, not literally, but in spirit. A soul becomes water, becomes silt, becomes current, and is guided gently toward the next dream. In this way, the river was not a boundary, nor a barrier, nor even a resource. It was a guide, a companion, a passageway, from one existence to another. Walk now along the riverbank, feeling the soil, firm beneath your steady steps. Listen to the sound, the hush of water kissing stone, sliding into reed-hidden inlets, tugging grains of sand, and carrying them farther downstream. The river's path is never a straight line. It curls and bends, as though following invisible stories, ones that can be traced only by those who listen deeply. In some places, the river squeezes itself between rock walls carved long ago by glacier or time. Here, light struggles to enter, shadow clings to damp ledges, and the water deepens into cold, ink-like pools. Fish glide through these narrows, like whispers of silver thought. Roots dangle from the cliffside, like unraveling threads from a garment time forgot. The air carries a coolness that reaches bone and slows even the fiercest heart. The river's voice changes here, lower, quieter, as though it is not merely moving, but remembering. Beneath that muted rumble lie stories too old for words to hold. Downstream, the gorge opens wide. The river spreads into a sheet of calm water, so smooth it turns into sky. Constellations reflect here, sharp and trembling, as though the river has become a second firmament. Stars wheel overhead, but they also appear beneath your gaze, twin maps moving at once, with no clear boundary between heaven and earth. It is said that ancient astronomers came here not to measure, but to marvel, that they sat in silence until dawn dissolved the illusion of two skies, that they understood. The river's surface was not a reflection, but a reminder. Everything above also lives below. Everything visible has a hidden twin. Everything known is mirrored in the unknown, and all of it flows at a bend where the river slows. To rest after its descent, you may feel or imagine a murmur rising, not a spoken tale, not a song, but something almost like a memory, translated into sensation, stories held close. For generations, tender and unspoken, a hunter walking into the river, so his grief would be washed away. A mother kneeling at twilight to whisper her daughter's name, so the river would never forget her. Children tossing pebbles and pretending each one was a secret wish the current would carry to faraway shores. These are the stories the river gathers, without asking, without effort. These are the memories it refuses to lose. Follow now toward the river's mouth. The ground flattens, the trees thin. Salt creeps into the air, like breath from some giant sleeping beast. The river widens its shoulders, broad, slow and luminous, gathering itself for the moment, when fresh water mingles with salt, and at last it meets the ocean, not with triumph, not with fanfare, but with surrender, a curve of liquid silver fading into blue, a hush, not an ending. Here the silt settles slowly, into currents wider than imagination, carrying with it the weight of every story, collected along the river's winding path. No grand revelation arrives. There is no roar of transformation, no visible sign of knowledge passing hands, only a soft recognition. Some knowledge is too vast to be contained. Some memory is too fluid to be held by one mind, one family, one age. The river remembers for all, and it carries those memories, not as burden, but as promise. As night draws itself across the sky, and the tide creeps in to meet the moon, listen closely. Water slides over rock in a cadence older than words. It retreats and returns and retreats again. The rhythm is steady, breathing with the world itself. Whispers tell us that nothing truly leaves this earth. Stories do not vanish. Footsteps do not disappear. Grief dissolves, but is not forgotten. Laughter falls silent, but echoes in unseen currents. All that we offer forward, intentionally or simply by living, is caught by the river that winds patiently through time, bound for the ocean, bound for the world, bound for whatever lies beyond. The river remembers everything, and as sleep gathers around you, you, too, are carried gently, your breath joining the flow, your heartbeat sinking with the hush of water, every story you have lived, cradled in the river's silver hands,